Hello and welcome to the Monday, March 14th, 2011 City Council Informational Meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. We do have one additional change to our agenda. After our staff report from Deborah Owen, we'll move on to an update from Mark Cotter, and then we'll go on to our open discussion and presentations. So we'll move on to our City Council staff report with Deborah Owen, City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations.
Thank you and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. Just a couple of things about tonight's 7 o'clock agenda. As you know, Council Chair Jameson will be the acting mayor tonight, but there are no proposed changes or amendments to items on the agenda, so it should be fairly straightforward as you work through that at 7 o'clock tonight. And then also just a reminder that we will be web streaming all City Council meetings in the future starting today at the Public Services Committee. Those will not be aired on Channel 16 at this point, but they will be web streamed and then archived on the siouxfalls.org website under City Council. And then lastly, just to give you an update on the Northwest District vacancy and how that is progressing. Our deadline is soon approaching. It is Wednesday the 16th at noon. We've had additional applicants submit the paperwork today, and we're looking forward to hearing from more, too. We've had a number of phone calls and some emails, and so we've had a great amount of interest. In addition, I know that I'm sure that Council members Brown and Erpenbach will give their update on the listening and learning session on Saturday, but there was some great input there as well, and some real interest. So that's all my report. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Deborah on web streaming or the Northwest District?
I haven't looked at my email recently, but is it applicants? More than one today?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
I think there was one that just came in at 4 o'clock, but there was one prior to it. So
good. Thank you.
Yep, a total of 3 so far.
Competition's heating up. All right, we'll move right on into an update from Mark Cotter, and I'm not sure who Mark has with him, but Mark is going to give us an update on the potential flooding conditions for Sioux Falls and the procedures that they're doing, I think, to prepare for that. Mark, welcome.
Good afternoon, City Council. Thank you, Councilor Jameson. Today we do also have a number of people here. Regan Smith will provide you an update from our Emergency Operations Center. And we also have some individuals with the Corps of Engineers to introduce you to. They'll be essentially the public faces for the Corps of Engineers that will take this project through not only the construction but also the monitoring phase as we start to prepare for this melt. From the City of Sioux Falls and Public Works we've been engaging our mapping team and each individual division to make sure that they identify the critical infrastructure, and you've certainly seen that it's the water purification plant, a series of wells that are up and down the river, but also light and power, and then some of the key sanitary sewer lift stations that are normally close and adjacent to the river. We've already moved forward and started to take steps to protect some of those, and we'll do it in a priority order based on their function. We are starting to, it just takes a few days to actually ramp up. We've been working with the Corps of Engineers last week and all through the weekend to not only write the agreement of this advanced measure, but also develop the scope. And the engineers with the Corps of Engineers, they've been not only working with their hydrologists and modeling what the protection should be, but then they back in a scope of work that's multi-page to best prepare us. Now we've been in constant communication with them today. They are working right now that they have the project scope, they're working through the funding of this project, and so we hope to hear very soon that the funding's been authorized by the federal government to move forward, and so we should hear more in the coming hours or tomorrow on that part. Some of the other items, I don't want to overlap too much with what Regan will share, but the bike trail essentially from Skunk Creek all the way north to the diversion channel and then down to the spillway will be closed. That press release should be going out if it hasn't already gone out, just because the amount of, even in advance of the construction activities, there'll be a lot of pickups and monitoring equipment up there. We just want to make sure that it's a safe environment for the constructors, but also to make sure that there's no bicyclists or walkers or runners up there. One of the other things, and just to make sure that we're as efficient as we can, we are looking at purchasing a multi-bagger piece of equipment that would help us fill sandbags if we get to that stage. And it's also a piece of equipment that we could use to fill compost at the landfill. There's very few machines that can do both, but it would be, there's only one vendor that we're aware of that we would do. It's not a part of our plan, but we would just use funds out of fleet to make that purchase. If you would, we just want to make sure that you're aware of it, and if you have any concerns, please let me know. But I would get that coming to Sioux Falls. And with that, there is a lot of work that's happening. We're doing daily briefings, and Regan's the key coordinator of that. So I'll have him come up and share that that's a multi-agency briefing that happens on a daily basis. And we're setting up those distribution lists so we can get about 2 o'clock each day. We draft a situation report and send those out, and we'll certainly make sure that you're copied to those so you can stay on a daily basis connected to this process. Before we bring up the Corps of Engineers folks, I'll probably have Regan come up, and then we'll get them up here. Regan?
Thanks, Mark. Regan Smith, City Emergency Manager, Sioux Falls Fire Rescue. As Mark said, the mayor did direct us to form a flood management team last week. We did brief council leadership on that. That team has been meeting at the city's Emergency Operations Center, which is located in the Law Enforcement Center. We've got representatives from city departments, the county, and various staff. State of South Dakota, and now the Corps of Engineers has co-located with us at that location. We do have a daily agenda briefing at 9 a.m. and we go through all the activities and the planned activities that are occurring, go over the current situation with the National Weather Service also. We've got a pretty robust public information communications plan that is being enacted. We've worked with the Helpline 211 Center, and we've got a flood information line for Sioux Falls residents and Minnehaha County residents, and that's active. So we encourage residents that have any questions or concerns or want information to contact that number. We've just this afternoon added a website, a page on our website, and that's www.siouxfalls.org/flood, and that will have a lot of information also. Both of those sites both those sources will add information as we go on. Mark and myself and Linda Young from the county are also doing daily media briefs, and that's occurring. We're just piggybacking with the daily law enforcement brief at 10:30 at the Law Enforcement Center. Just want to let everybody here and the public know Governor Dugard will be in town on Wednesday and having an open meeting to the public at the Sioux Falls Convention Center at 7 a.m. and everybody's welcome to that. To the council, I'm going to try to, as Mark said, I'm going to try to get out a daily situation report to you folks, probably between 2 or 3 each day, so you understand where we're at on all of these planning activities, where we're at on the flood forecast, so you'll be right there with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Regan. Okay, right now I'd like to bring up John Bartell. He's the public face for the Corps of Engineers. John is actually from South Dakota. He resides in Pierre. He's had a long career with the Corps of Engineers. They brought him back from retirement to run this project, and so with that, John.
Thank you. I was set up here this morning, or I arrived here last night with the intent that we were going to start the contracting procedures. And first thing I want to make sure you understand is that we're here to assist in the flood fight efforts. We're not here to run the flood fight efforts, but we are here to assist. Decisions will be made, that will be made by us will be run through your Public Works Department for approval before we make any of these major decisions. With that being said, we had every intention of doing a site showing this afternoon and awarding a contract about 7 to 8 o'clock tonight. Unfortunately, with many plans, those things changed, and it all revolved around the funding issue from headquarters, our headquarters office. And I'm not sure if I want to go into all the details of it, but bottom line is there's some concerns with the current flood control project that's being constructed here and the funding there versus the funding that we provide under PL 8499. So, and we understand there's very difference in the money, and and we're trying to answer those questions right now. So, with that, any questions?
Well, maybe just one real quick on that funding mechanism. That's a big deal. I mean, if I know you're here to assist, and I was thinking that the Corps was going to be in charge, and that it's your levy and it's your assist. We're just going along with your instructions. But in the end here, if the funding doesn't come through because of where we're at, the city's positioned well, right, Mark, to fund this project and make sure these levees are fortified and the necessary steps are taken, even if the federal funds don't come, right? I mean,
well, they're just working out that level of scope. One of the things that we've been asked today is a series of questions, and so once it got to the point where the district office in Omaha developed the plans, then that goes to their division office, which is in Portland. At that point is when headquarters hears about the project as we understood, and as soon as headquarters was involved, they started to get questions on the funding. I think we all expected that the Corps would come right in and do all the advanced measures, and these funding concerns would not. I mean, this was news to us at about 11 o'clock today. So we've been each time there's a question, we've been trying to turn that around quickly. But essentially, like John said, the initial is that there's a concern that this Phase 3 is a part of our long-term flood control project, and the Corps does not like to mix emergency funds with project funds. Well, our position is that since this work isn't permanent, it's not mixing funds with emergency funds. So, again, we've been working to sort this out, but it's been, I was certainly hoping to be able to come here today at 3 o'clock saying that the contractors had the meeting with John and that bids would be coming back tonight at 8, but we're not there yet.
When I say that we're here to assist you, when it comes to the actual contract, when the funds come through and it comes to the actual contract, it'll be our contracting people, our inspection. We'll do that, but we will not make any major decisions or changes without the input from the City of Sioux Falls. I don't want to get the wrong impression that we're making you guys do all the work. We're just here to talk to you. No, we actually take an active part, but we do not make any major decisions without the input of the City of Sioux Falls.
if I could just follow up, just to make sure, Mark, do you have a deadline, though, from when you will act on our own, even if the Corps is unable to make a decision on their end, that we will start acting on our own and just go to work?
Well, I would expect this is a large project. John, you want to at least share the range of where this project's at, or not at this point?
Dollar-wise, you mean, Mark?
Dollar right. They're currently redoing the project from when I left Omaha last night. Last night we were looking at one project, which was several $1 million to raise the levees and do the work we needed to do. They are now looking at putting it into phases, and I have not got the numbers on that at this time. So it was kind of they're kind of putting in the same work progression that we would have done anyway under one contract, but to help out with the funding mechanism when the money comes. We'll start with the most needed areas first and work our way up to the higher risk areas. Or I shouldn't say higher risk areas, but to the higher elevations of protection.
Councilor Intiman?
You did, earlier though, you did say that you hope to have an answer either this evening or tomorrow at the latest as far as the funding for this goes. Is that correct?
We hope to. I'm kind of expecting a answer at any time, to tell you the truth. But
Okay.
I'm not going to make any guarantees because we're sitting out here kind of guessing what question they're going to ask next.
So, Mark, you should be able to answer this at press conference time tomorrow morning, correct?
Well,
I would certainly hope to, and again, we're hoping to be here to actually lay out the full plan, because that's in a sense what we laid out this morning at the press conference. Was yesterday contractors were emailed that there would be a pre-bid conference at 3 o'clock today, and then a letting at 8 o'clock, and then contract award at 9. And so that got delayed, but I would certainly hope by morning. That's what we just pressed our last conference call on. And we've reached out to our congressional delegation, because we certainly want to keep them abreast of the project, but with the funding concern, we want to make sure that they were well aware of that there's a funding concern on this project.
I might be speaking for the rest of the counselors here too, but I would like you to notify us just as soon as you find out, if you would, please.
Will do.
Councilor Brown?
I don't know if this is for Mark or John, but just so the public understands, and so I think I understand, this is a temporary fix, right? And then you tear this away afterwards?
Under Public Law 8499, which gives us the authority to act to give anywhere from technical assistance to advanced measures to emergency operations, we are required to go in, complete the structure, and then when the flood is over, well, the first part of it is that for us to do anything, the city has to sign an agreement with the Corps of Engineers. And it's the requirements in that agreement are there by law. And some of the things are the city has to provide the real estate actions, they have to provide the borrow site materials, and then one of the other things is they have to remove the structure afterwards. And the reasoning for this is because when we go to construction, we're not working under optimal conditions. Sometimes we're working on frozen ground, sometimes we're moving 5-6 foot of snow off of it, and a lot of times we don't get the compaction that we really need. It's good enough for a flood for 3, 4, 5 days, 6 days, but it's not good for a permanent structure. And so we like to have in that agreement that whoever the sponsor is, in this case City of Sioux Falls, is required to remove the material that was placed to fight the flood.
I guess this isn't a question, but more of a statement. But it's amazing to me that we have waited and waited for years to build up these flood controls, and we'll spend millions of dollars in a matter of days, but yet can't get a dime out of the federal government to live up to its promise it made to us to build these up years ago.
I understand.
That's amazing.
I understand.
I'm very appreciative of your help, and I know those decisions are made by you, John, but it makes no sense.
If they were made by me, you'd have the money, but it's not.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, John.
Mark, do you have anybody else that needs to present to us, or you want to introduce?
The only other person with me tonight is Dave Becker. He is the operations manager for Gavin's Point, and in most scenarios he would be up here standing talking to you instead of me, but because of my experience with previous flood fights, I've been asked to come up here, and Dave is shadowing me, and if this happens at another time in the future, you'll probably see him standing here instead of me. So,
thank you.
And just to the City Council, I'll provide you an update daily through this process, certainly through the construction. We'll attach the situation report on each day so you can see what activities are happening, not only with Sioux Falls, but the county activities as well. So as soon as we get an answer to this, I'll let you know.
Mark, if I could, certainly you're involved in this process a lot of all the details, and I encourage you to stay in that role, but you know better than us if this funding mechanism triggering that needs to occur is just a slight little hiccup, or if it's a big red flag that we should all be worried about. To me, standing over here, it's a big red flag. And the fact that we're kind of just sitting here waiting doesn't sit well. Makes me nervous. Should make you nervous, I think. But I need to judge off of you on how nervous you might be, because if you're nervous, we need to have a deadline in place for you to start acting on your own, and then we'll continue to wait for them. But for God's sakes, Mark, you've got to protect our city from this flood, essentially.
Right.
And we're putting this in your hands because you know all the details. So could you give us some leadership on a time deadline that is just absolute, that we cannot wait anymore? If we don't have something, you're ready to go in action, and so help us with that.
Well, I would certainly say we have 24 hours, and I think we need to give that to the Corps because they just had their package
Very good.
ready for, and so I would say we're really 24 hours away before we have to start taking some necessary steps.
Let it be said, 4:20 tomorrow afternoon. All right, thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Mark,
Oh.
wasn't it that we didn't necessarily expect the Corps even here until Tuesday or Wednesday? So I guess what I'm saying is that waiting another 24 hours, would still be within the timeline we were looking at last week.
Well, I would say from the call we received last Wednesday at 4 o'clock till now, it's been very fluid, I would say. And then just with the amount of activity that happened over the weekend, and then with John coming in last night at 8, we started, starting to move off that midweek to now, just to make sure that we had as much time as possible to give the contractors to not only to get the improvements in place, so then we can go right into monitoring. And so I would say it's been a pretty fluid schedule, and with the scope of work getting finalized yesterday, and immediately, I mean, the Corps office in Omaha has been working very good, been working as fast as they can with the design piece. And then we had contractors that I was aware of that got emails yesterday that said, be prepared for a 3 o'clock meeting in Sioux Falls to review the scope of work, and then at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, the bids will be due back, and by 9 o'clock, they would actually sign contracts. And so I would say things were moving along very well, and the funding piece has been a surprise to me, and so we'll keep you posted.
Any other questions for Mark or Dave or John? Okay, thanks, Mark. And Regan, thanks. Good luck. All right, we'll move on to our City Council open discussion. Any items we'd like to cover? Councilor Brown.
I'll just quickly review that Councilor Erpenbach and I were at the Hy-Vee last week. She was the star of the show, and it went very well. We had good attendance, good questions, and ranged on a number of topics from the Northwest District, which was our sort of the focus of it, and then everything from the event center to code enforcement and the usual issues that you would expect to be asked of the City Council. So we look forward to other council members doing those as well.
I was the female Phil Donahue. It was awesome. But to his credit, Council Brown had kind of done an outline for us so that we could do some kind of back and forth stuff. It worked out really well. I can't wait to see it. It'll be on Channel 16 at some point. So we'll let you know.
Councilor Brown.
And also just the staff that was there. Deborah, we appreciate having her there. She did a great job of getting things lined up for us.
Very good. Any other items? Of course, I don't know if Tony is able to just to make a shot of our empty chair over there, or Councilor Litz. I don't know what else we can do to make a call out to the citizens of Sioux Falls that we need as many people as possible to step up and participate. We're looking forward to a vigorous process. We're looking for a new team member. So
It's lonely over here.
yeah. Councilor Entenmann is being excluded from many things, so we need to find a friend for him, and Councilor Aguilar. Just one other update I was going to make. that house on Waltz that was burned and was being torn down, this Friday at 7 a.m., they're actually going to start the tear down process and remove the debris and get that project going. So it's moving ahead, and a lot of help from Russ Sorensen and his group. Just a great example of a lot of neighbors coming together to help an individual who needed it. And I look forward to, hopefully, I think the council creating a policy that would allow the city to participate, just as these neighbors have. But anyway, Friday, that's happening, 7 a.m. You're all invited if you'd like to watch and participate, probably. Anything else? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our presentations. We're going to start off with our 2011 Sculpture Walk with Jim Clark. But I see Russ coming ahead.
It'll be a tag team today. Okay. Good afternoon, Council Chair, City Council members, and the viewing public. My name is Russ Sorensen with the City Planning Office. And along with me this afternoon is Mr. Jim Clark, who's the South Dakota Principal Manager for Excel, and the Sculpture Walk Executive Director. Mr. Clark and I are here this afternoon to provide you with a glimpse of the proposed 2011 Sculpture Walk program. You'll be considering the resolution at your next meeting on Monday the 21st. Sculpture Walk is now in its 8th year and has grown from 34 sculptures back in 2004 to over 50 sculptures for this program. There were over 140 entries received and juried by the Sculpture Walk Committee. And the program is, again, an international and a national program where we have 3 countries, Nigeria, Canada, and England, participating, along with 17 states in our country. And we have 3 South Dakota artists as well. The Sculpture Walk program represents a broad collaboration of our downtown entities, individuals, and both public and private, including downtown Sioux Falls, the Sioux Falls Arts Council, and the Chamber of Commerce in the City of Sioux Falls. The exhibition of art, we feel, is important to our downtown, in that it helps create a first impression for visitors by bringing a large number of sculptures to the outdoor display area in our community. It simply enhances the beauty of our community and the culture of our downtown area. There's over 100 businesses and individuals that contribute annually for the financial strength of the Sculpture Walk program, and over 50 volunteers. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim Clark, who will unveil the 2011 Sculpture Walk program. And that will conclude our presentation unless you have further questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Hello, Jim.
Thank you, Russ. City Council, Councilor Jameson. Good to be back, going into our 8th year now. As Russ mentioned, we have artists from coast to coast in 3 countries, England, Nigeria, and Canada this year. And we also have the Vera Indoor program, which is going into its 4th year, and that's growing to 23 sculptures. And this year, we're starting a new program over at the University of Sioux Falls, and that will have 12 sculptures. So we're excited about that. Today's PowerPoint is going to show the sculpture photos and information about the sculptures and also the sites where they will be located. Some of the sculptures may be moved from the sites that we show here. That just happens every year for various reasons. And one example is the sculpture might not fit the pedestal that we have it assigned to. We try to really focus in on that early so that we don't have to do too much of that moving, but it does happen, and if we have to move one, we end up moving 3. That's just the way it is. The sites should remain the same except for one, and that is in front of Kello TV. That will be an additional site. So let's go ahead and get started on the PowerPoint. I think we want to get this done in about 15 minutes or less. The first sculpture is going to be at the pavilion in the South Plaza. It's a big sculpture, 184 inches high and quite wide, and it's kinetic. Kids can move those red heads around the big head in the center, so they should have a lot of fun with that. The next sculpture is called Red Dress, which is in front of Home Federal. This is done by Shohini Ghosh, a nice sculpture, a nice bronze sculpture. And then moving down onto Phillips Avenue on the northwest corner of 11th and Phillips is all in the same boat. And this is Kyle Folker from Minneapolis, and he's participated, I think, just about every year in Sculpture Walk. A nice, unique sculpture. I tried to talk him into doing Sioux Falls architecture, but he thought, well, if it doesn't sell, then I'm stuck with a sculpture with Sioux Falls historic places. So I might still get that accomplished. Next sculpture is down in front of the bookstore, Stego for Us, which is a nice bronze sculpture. By the way, the photos that you're looking at were submitted by the artists in their entry packets. So some of them you can see well, some not so well, and some are even sketches, I think. The next sculpture is in front of the cataract, called Afternoon Sun, done by D. Clements. It's a bronze sculpture. The next one is called Sandhill Cranes in front of Mrs. Murphy's Irish Gifts. A couple of cranes done by Gregory Johnson of Georgia. The next sculpture is there, and this is a figure from a monumental sculpture from the Underground Railroad dedication in Lewiston, New York. And it's a much larger sculpture, and this is one of the figures from that. And that is where the slaves escaped to freedom from New York into Canada. So it has quite a story behind it, done by Susan Geisler. Hey Mary Lou Blindside, done by Lee Looning and Sherry Treby. They're very excited about this sculpture. Has some humor to it, and that's similar to Norman Rockwell style. And that will be on the southwest corner of 10th and Phillips. The next sculpture across the street to the north is one done by Martin Eichinger of Washington, a great artist, nationally known. And then to the north of that is African Beauty. Our Nigerian artist has two in a row here. They go well together. And he has shipped his sculptures, so we're anxious to see those in a week or two. Oracle, next to it to the north. Both these are just south of the diner. Bronze sculptures. Start Paddling. This is in front of the diner where Canteen Lady is now, and this is we thought we'd change that from a figurative to an abstract for this year. And Nathan Pierce is one of our better abstract artists. And The Nest, done by Virginia Sperry of Virginia, and this has a little nest inside the egg. It's really a beautiful sculpture, nice size. It'll be by the diner, or north of the diner by the fountain. And also by the fountain, just to the south, is Dakota Wind, done by Martha Pettigrew. She's a new artist this year. They come from Kearney, Nebraska, she and her husband. He's also participating this year. Nice size sculpture. A Feather's Flight, large sculpture, 54 inches high. Those are big feathers, done by Deb Zelenik of Colorado, another new artist. I think we have about 18 new artists this year. And this is north of the fountain. And Zodiac Totem is just one of these. I don't know why we have two in the photo, but it's one, and it's Zodiac figures. And that's on Phillips Avenue right by the CNA building between 9th and 10th. And it's 60 inches high. Fat Tony, new artist, Gregory Mendez from Indiana. First time we've had an Indiana artist participate. Big sculpture. And this is a sculpture from a video game, and I guess kids will really like it, high school and college kids. Midnight Snack, but done by Mary Zimmerman, who's been with us every year. Nice little sculpture that will be on the southwest corner of 9th and Phillips. And then going over onto Main Avenue is Pageant Apples, done by Chris Kilbane. He's from the Duluth area. This will be in front of First Dakota National Bank on 9th. Goddess of the Grapes in front of Wells Fargo, done by Deb Zeller of Victoria, Minnesota. She also has a vineyard up there. So she has two sculptures, both related to grapes. The next sculpture, as we go back over onto Main in front of U.S. Bank at 8th and Main, called The Return. Bev Steigerwald is the artist. She's new this year, from Colorado. Now we're going over to East 8th, the Morning Star. This will be at the entrance to Sharapa Place. Nice big sculpture, 84 inches high, steel. Further down to the east in front of R&L Supply, they're a new site sponsor this year. Judd Nelson, new artist from Minnesota. That's a big raven. 32 inches high, 32 inches long. That's a big bird. And then Soaring Eagle we have over on East 8th by 8th and Railroad Center, done by Chris Powell. This is stainless steel and brass, and I think you might have some copper also. And then on the corner of 8th and Reed is Chasing My Tail Again, done by Matt Miller of Missouri. He's a new artist. Another nice size sculpture. This will be completely painted and look like new when it gets here. Next, back on Phillips Avenue in front of First National Bank is Choosing From Within. Elisa Looney, new artist from Oregon, made out of painted steel. Also a nice size, 78 inches high, 66 inches wide. And then a little further south in front of the First Financial Center is Queued Up, another new artist, Kate Christopher. Further south in that big planter we have two sculptures, The Chase, which is a bronze done by Del Pettigrew, and it's Chasing Leaping Hare done by Nick Lagueros from Minneapolis. Further south on a concrete pad is A Bad Hair Day. This is a Greek donkey, and done by Jerry McKellar, who this year did Flower Dancing in the Wind and won People's Choice with that. So I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful sculpture. And further south we have three smaller sculptures together, The Man and the Muse, done by Deb Zeller. And this is in front of Holzen House. Pneumatica, Steve Flan from New Jersey, new artist. This is marble. And Walt Geist, this is kind of hard to see this one, but it looks like leaves and it's a figure of a head and shoulders. Done by Lee Badger of West Virginia. And Lee's participated several years with us. This year he did Foul Ball. Pains of Life, a new young artist from Sioux Falls, Jonathan Sweet, a graduate of Roosevelt High School. This one will be in front of Skelly's. And Man in Motion across the street on the southeast corner of 10th and Phillips will be Man in Motion, done by Dennis Klein of British Columbia, Canada. Orion, done by Sam Spix of Minnesota. This will be in front of Rayfeld's Gallery. Big 10 feet tall sculpture. Expectant Mother, done by Ben Hammond of Utah. This will be in front of Suzanne's. Territorial Dispute, new artist Don Harmon from Arizona. This will be elevated on a pedestal in front of Chef Dominique's. So some of these sculptures we're building a couple of pieces to elevate them higher so they get out of harm's way. They're hard, some of these are so wide they're hard to place on pedestals, so we have to get them up higher. And the three that we are doing this with will look good up high. This is one of them. Rapturous Arcs will be in the corner, on the northeast corner, in front of Shriver's. Nice big sculpture, done by Gregory Mendez, his second sculpture. And bringing on the heat, Gregory Johnson's second sculpture. So we have one for football and this one for soccer. And as you can tell, this one is a work in progress at this point, but will be done by May. Then further south is Raptor, done by Kate Denton of England. She did The Lady Sitting on the Bench this year. That sculpture was sold. And this sculpture, when you look at it close up, it looks like a petrified wood. She's a great artist. Further south, I have in front of Traditions, it's really Michelle's Coffee Shop, is Chelsea, done by Pokey Park of Arizona. Trinity, bad picture. some of these artists don't do themselves any favors with the pictures that they send in. It's quite different than this. Robert Bruce is from Sioux Falls, and he does great work. He did the ice this year, which is down in front of Midco on 13th and Phillips. Does great work, but the photos that he sends in really aren't very good. But knowing his work, this will really be a nice sculpture. And this sculpture also was a work in progress when he took the photo, and I've seen a version that's almost done, and he just does fantastic work. This is Osamid Obazi, originally from Nigeria, lives in California now, and does really neat work, very unique. This will be in front of the federal courthouse. Captain Levin, Porter Williams, his first sculpture with us, did a nice job on the captain. This is the one that will be in front of Kello TV. We've been engaged in a fundraising campaign, and we finally raised the money, so now he's not going to be in front of Midco, he's going to be in front of Kello TV. So that's appropriate. And we're having him bronze at our own foundry here on 8th Street. And then to the north is Alice in Wonderland bench done by Lance Carlton of Washington. It's a big bench. It's 79 inches long, 60 inches high. And then further north, this one will go in the planter on the northwest corner of 12th and Phillips. And it's a big sculpture. It'll stand out there. Guidance done by Deb Zelenik. And it's all bronze. The rocks look like rocks, and the branches look like branches, but wood. But it's all bronze and very sturdy. Everything done by Nathan Pierce of Missouri will be near Bechtold's Jewelry. And outfoxed, behind the fox is a little mouse. So that's kind of the humor in the sculpture. And this will be in front of Meyer, Henry, and Sargent Law Firm. And then the last one, the top 50, Joy of the Dance, done by D.E. McDermott of Virginia. And you probably recognize his work. He's had other pieces with us last year. I think last year may have been his first year with us. Does fantastic work. Then we get to the alternates. In case we have to call these, we need to get them approved. And this happens every so often where one of the top 50 can't make it, so we call on one of these. Pokey Park from Arizona. Totem from Stephen Mack of Florida. Most of our alternates are second or third sculptures from artists that are already coming, so it makes it easy to just bring it along. Kingbird from Felix from Nigeria. This one's different, and I think this guy pulled this one out. He was a new artist from Canada, and it's an abstract, but I think he decided not to participate as an alternate. And I'm out of here from Del Pettigrew, a small bronze. Indian Dancer from Georgine McGonigal of Colorado. Anthropomorphia III, done by Ernie Stedman of Oregon. And Jet from Nick Lagueros from Minneapolis. And there are a lot of them. The Vertices from Chris Cobain from Duluth. And Exponentiality from Lance Carlton of Washington. I think that should be it. Some of these are not. There we go. So that is it. I want to thank all of you for your support over the years. It's been a wonderful partnership. All of the departments, some of the guys have left, but they've all been tremendous to work with. Not a problem anywhere along the way with anybody. So we work hard to maintain that. You don't get any phone calls or complaints about us. So if you do, let me know. I'm sure you will. So those are the sculptures for Sculpture Walk 2011. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions for Jim or Russ? I guess Councilor Brown.
Just a comment. Jim, thank you. I know you put a ton of volunteer time into this. And Russ Sorensen from the city, too, thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Oh, Councilor Intiman.
One other thing, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Jim really does take this exhibit personally, and he has personal ownership in this. And I must commend him, if you're not aware of it. Usually every morning in the summertime on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, by around 6 or 6:30, 7 o'clock at the latest, he's walking downtown making sure the sculptures are in fine shape, and he really does do a good job. And Jim, you need to be commended. It's an excellent program.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Very good. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Jim, do you know who this is?
May I comment?
Briefly, sure.
Thank you. My name is Dean Naser. I have the law offices over on the corner of 10th and Main, and I think this is a tremendous project. We were part of the tail end of remodeling the downtown and renovating down there. I would like to see consideration given to Main Avenue as one of the places for a repository of these beautiful statues. We don't have anything on Main Avenue. It kind of stops on Phillips. And we've got over a dozen small businesses all open to the public down there, starting from the Minghua and wrapping around the street, the Cookie Jar past Earsay, Nacer Law Offices, the Optometric Center, Parker's Restaurant, Young and Richards, and Interstate Office, and a lot of those. We would love to see this extended to us as well.
Okay, very good. Duly noted. Thank you.
Just to comment on that, we would too. I think the sidewalk is a little narrow up there, so that creates a bit of a challenge for us. But and the pedestrian traffic isn't as great. I just wish Main Avenue was two-way, and I think that would help the growth on Main Avenue.
Okay, now we're stretching it.
Pardon? Well, we are. We're going way beyond now what Mr. Nasser said. But if two-way would really help.
Okay.
The pedestrian traffic and the growth, I think, up there with the businesses. So,
all right, James. Thanks. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to our next presentation with Tracy Turbeck, our December 31st, 2010 monthly financial report. But I think Tracy's going to give us an annual update as well.
Yes, we'll cover all of the 2010 financial results. So, Tracy Turbeck, Director of Finance. Pleased to be here today with the presentation of the city's financial results for 2010. Before I start the presentation, I should thank Councilor Jameson for his assurance that as this is my debut presentation before the council, that you will all be especially kind to me and not ask any questions just to stump the new guy. So thank you all in advance for that. I've known you for a long time, though. As the subheading indicates, this report is pending final audit. The city independent audit has been completed, and the report will be presented to the audit committee on the 22nd of this month. So until that fat lady sings on the 22nd, this is still considered to be unaudited. So in terms of the presentation outline today, I thought before I get into the financial portion, I want to present a few slides on economic indicators and economic activity that we saw here in Sioux Falls during 2010 as kind of a backdrop to some of the financial activity and results that the city experienced during 2010. From there, we'll focus on kind of the big picture in terms of where truly the big dollars are in the general fund. We'll talk about revenues and expenditures, unreserved fund balance, kind of where we ended the year, and then move on to the sales tax fund, or what I may refer to from time to time as a capital fund, fund revenues, as well as some of the investments that were made in capital infrastructure and other projects, and also touch on the unobligated fund balance in that fund as well before moving on to the enterprise funds, cash flows, revenues, expenditures, and then a few comments and slides on the city's debt status as of the end of the year. So that's kind of the windshield tour of where I'm headed here. And with that, we'll start with the economic backdrop. This is kind of intended to present a little bit of context or provide context to the 2010 results. I'll touch on some of the employment trends. A lot of this will look familiar to you. Construction activity, interest rates, and taxable sales here in Sioux Falls. The unemployment rates locally ended the year rather flat with 2009 here in Sioux Falls at 4.7%. Statewide, very, very similar at 4.8. As you can see in the chart, the top line, the green line, is the national unemployment rate, considerably higher, ended the year at 9.6%. So there's about a 5-point spread between the national unemployment rate and the rate here locally, which is quite remarkable. I think sometimes maybe here in South Dakota we can maybe take that a little bit for granted that that's the way it should be, but it is quite remarkable and certainly worth mentioning. The negative trends that we saw in unemployment during 2008 and 2009 have clearly abated and fortunately did not carry in to 2010. The next slide is a reflection of the kind of the flip side of unemployment. This depicts the number of jobs, number of people working nationally on the green line again, and then locally and statewide. You can see that the sharp drop-off in 2008 and 2009 came to an end and improved considerably during 2010. The local growth rate was still negative, however, for 2010 at a negative 0.4%, but considerable improvement over the experience of the previous 2 years. We were speaking of job losses in hundreds rather than thousands of jobs in 2010. So far from outstanding, but certainly much improved from the 2009 experience. This, I thought, was a kind of an interesting slide that was pulled from the Federal Reserve Bank website that gives you a little perspective on how how South Dakota and this region compare on a state-by-state basis with the national unemployment statistics. And the time frame on this slide begins in June of 2009, which is, according to the Federal Reserve, when the recession came to an end and we entered a phase of economic recovery. So you can see that South Dakota and Sioux Falls certainly enjoy a level of economic stability significantly better than that of many of our neighboring states, and certainly better than the nation as a whole. The bottom line there represents the unemployment rates in North Dakota, with South Dakota just slightly higher than that, and a significant spread when you look at Minnesota, Montana, Wisconsin, and the national rate at the very top. So in comparison to many of the surrounding states, South Dakota has fared very well and continues to do so. And again, I think that's maybe a fact that's maybe underappreciated by some of us. Moving on from employment to looking at the construction activity. Over the past 10 years, you can see we peaked in 2007, saw a pretty steep decline in 2008, that bottomed out in 2009 and was down only slightly during 2010. And again, the good news there is that the steep decline did flatten out, and we saw not great construction activity, but certainly fair activity in 2010. At about $282 million. I put this next slide in to give you a picture of the long-term interest rates. This happens to be a 30-year mortgage rate over the last 10 years, and it certainly underscores how historically low mortgage rates are and long-term rates. And I think going forward, those low rates certainly are favorable to borrowers and should be stimulative to the economy as we move forward. Last slide on the economic data represents for the past 3 years, the Sioux Falls taxable sales growth. You can see that in 2008 we were experiencing rather modest growth in taxable sales. 2009 started out bad and just kind of went downhill from there. Slid down to more than a 6% negative growth in taxable sales. In 2010, just almost as if someone flipped a switch, the trend turned around, and we can see that the taxable sales began to climb very early in 2010. So in summary, I guess, is the backdrop in terms of the economy. Job losses improved significantly, and unemployment rate flattened out. In 2010, construction activity was fairly active and relatively flat to the 2009 experience. Interest rates continue to be low, and taxable sales have shown significant improvements over 2009. With that, I want to move into the focus on the general fund for a moment. The general fund, of course, is the primary operating fund of the city. It's supported primarily with tax revenues, and it provides many of the basic city services, such as the general government operations, public safety, which include the police and fire departments, street maintenance activities, many of the culture and recreational activities and facilities that we support, the library, parks and recreation, and so forth, as well as the planning and zoning function. Ordinarily, I tend to think of a general fund of a city as kind of the bellwether fund. If the general fund is having difficulty financially and in weak financial condition, typically you'll see that permeate the whole city. In this case, the general fund is in very good condition, I think, as you'll see as I finish out the presentation, and typically that translates to strength throughout the city as well. There oftentimes can be exceptions to that, but that's just kind of a general rule of thumb that if you have a strong general fund, typically you'll see strength throughout the organization. This first slide looks at the total general fund revenues over the last 5 years. You can see it's been a pretty steady upward overall trend. We're hoping certainly in a few years we'll look back at 2009 as nothing more than a pause in that trend. I guess time will tell if that holds true. We did see solid growth in our general fund revenues in 2010, going from $110 million to a little more than $115 million. So that was certainly a positive outcome for 2010, and I think is an important takeaway for you folks today. I want to take a minute and look a little more closely at that $115 million revenue figure and give you a little more background on the sources of that revenue. You can see the pie chart represents that $115 million revenue for the entire year. And as probably no surprise to you folks, taxes account for the lion's share of that. About 80% of the general fund revenues come from taxes. The two most significant sources of revenue, of course, are the property taxes and first penny sales tax that go into the general fund. I think it's worth commenting on, too, the balance that we see in this chart between property tax revenues and sales tax revenues. And I think that's another source of strength for the city to see that kind of a balance, that we're not inordinately dependent upon one or the other, that we do have a pretty good balance in our general fund in terms of the tax revenues that we see, each of those two making up about 38% of the total. The various sources of revenues drop off pretty drastically after taxes. Intergovernmental revenues, state and federal grants, kick in about 9%, and the remainder you can see I'll chip in a few percentage points to the total. Again, the total revenues were up about $4.4 million, ending at a little over $115 million, or about a 4% growth. So that's certainly very respectable growth rate for the city general fund. Looking at that same $115 million figure and drawing a comparison with the prior year results for 2009, you can see where that growth occurred and where the strength was. Certainly the tax growth in tax revenue was the major contributing factor to that growth. Total growth, again, about $4.4 million or 4%. Taxes kicking in a pretty solid performance at 5.4% growth. Drilling down a little deeper into that tax revenue number, I want to look at the two major players, property tax revenues and first penny sales tax revenues. This chart shows you a 10-year history on the property tax revenues that go into the general fund. You can see that it's been a very, very solid record of growth each year. 2010, we saw growth of about 7.3% over 2009. A significant portion of that coming from new development, new property coming on the tax rolls for the first time. The CPI adjustment is the inflationary adjustment provided for in state law, so that kicked in 3% of that 7.3% growth. In dollar terms, that's about a $2.9 million increase in property tax revenues. So again, that's very steady growth trend, and very critical that that continues to grow because it is such an important revenue source to provide those basic city services. Next, this is a very happy slide, I think, is sales tax revenue. The first penny sales taxes bounced back pretty well in 2010. We saw a 3.8% increase over 2009, and of course 2009 was a pretty dismal year with revenues down 5.8%. So that's quite a significant rebound in 1 year's time to go from down 5.8 up 3.8. So that's, while it's not outstanding in and of itself to have a 3.8% growth, certainly when you put it in perspective of where we were at the end of 2009, I think that is fairly remarkable to have almost a 10-point swing in the growth rate in 1 year. We still have considerable ground to recover that was lost in 2009. But I think we're certainly well on our way in 2010, or certainly 2010 results indicate that we're well on our way to recovering that lost ground. I should mention that a little over a year ago when the city put in place a contingency plan for the 2010 budget, at that time we were still forecasting about a 3% decline in sales tax revenues. So if you recall that trend line we saw a little bit earlier on the taxable sales started improving early in 2010 and really kept up the pace very well throughout the remainder of the year. So another slide depicting the sales tax revenue growth. This represents a 12-month rolling growth rate, and you can see in 2009 we started the year in positive territory. Revenues were growing, not extremely well, but they were still in positive territory, and very early in the year began to decline and bottomed out, of course, as you folks know, at the end of 2009 with about a decrease, or hit bottom at about 5.8% negative growth. And again, almost as if somebody flipped a switch, early in 2010 we see almost the reverse happening. Very early in the year, the growth rate turned around, started to head upward, and about September we crossed into positive territory on a full year over full year basis. And again, ending 2010 with a growth of 3.8% over the previous calendar year. I like this particular chart myself. I think it takes, I know it takes a lot of the variability from month to month when you're looking at a short period of time. The sales tax collections can vary rather significantly at times in a short period. So if you look at a little longer period of time, you can get, I think, a clearer picture of what the trend really looks like. Last slide on general fund revenues. I wanted to include a comparison of budget to actual, so you could see where the original budget had forecasted revenues and where we ended up in actual terms at the end of the year. The total budget, revenue budget number was $118 million. We came in at $115, so about 2.5% under budget, which I think if somebody would have stood before you a year ago and said we were going to come in that close to budget, you probably wouldn't have been too open to that concept. But it turned out to be an extremely turnaround, I guess you'd say, in the expectations from the beginning of 2010 to where we really ended up. Moving on now to the expenditure side of the budget. You can see again steady but gradual growth in spending in the general fund over the last 5 years. In 2010, the general fund expenditures increased about $2.7 million, or about 2.4% over the 2009 level. So kind of slow and steady, and it's, I think, very reflective of a growing community and over the 5-year time frame, a growing local economy. As I did with the revenues, I'd like to drill down into that $114 million figure and give you a little more of a picture of how that money was put to use. The pie chart here shows the functional areas where that operating money was spent, public safety being the single largest function that is supported by the general fund. That, of course, as I mentioned, really is made up of police and fire. After that, highways and streets and culture and recreation take the next larger slices of the pie. Keep in mind that this reflects just the operating cost and does not include any capital expenditures at all. So that's, I think, an important thing when you're looking at this particular pie chart. Again, looking at those expenditures in a table, comparing those to the 2009 results, you can see where the increases in expenditures occurred that ended up with a bottom line increase of about 2.4%. Comparing those actual results to the budget in the same functional categories, you can see that pretty much across the board every functional area contributed to keeping spending well below budget. In fact, the total budget was 7.2%, the total expenditures were 7.2% under budget. That translates to about $8.9 million, and I think that's a real credit to all of the departments in the city administration that took pretty decisive action in early 2010 to find operational efficiencies and identify cost-cutting measures to end the year in such a favorable position to your expenditure budget. Keep in mind that those savings were without any layoff of any city employees, and I think really in the end provided a great value to the public for their tax dollars. Looking at that same information, just in a little different perspective, this pie chart breaks the general fund expenditures down by their operational category. Personnel, of course, in a service organization is going to be the largest single area of expenditures, followed by operating expenses, other operating expenses. So you can see the greatest budget savings came in the other operating expenses category. That 11.4% reduction translates to about $4.2 million in budget savings. If you remember nothing else about the general fund part of this presentation, I hope you remember this slide, because I think it really tells an important story here. The kind of where we started the year, actually before we started the year, when the budget was adopted in September of 2009 to where we ended the year at the end of 2010. Again, the decisive action that was taken as a result of the contingency plan that was put into place, departments found operating efficiencies and targeted expenditure cuts rather than the meat-axe approach or across-the-board approach to reducing spending. Did really, I think, an outstanding job of finding ways to save money. The chart indicates, the first column there, the budget reflects that when first adopted, we were anticipating using $5.3 million of the unreserved fund balance to meet all the expenditure needs for 2010. When the contingency plan was put in place, that $5.3 million was reduced to $3.5 million. And you can see at the end of the day, we actually ended up with a positive increase in fund balance of $0.6 million. So that's, I think that's really quite a swing there, $5.9 million swing from the original adopted budget to where the actual results ended up. That $0.6 million, I guess maybe to put that in a little more perspective, that's obviously very close to a break even, amounts to about 1/2 of 1% of the total revenues of the fund. But significant in the fact that it was a positive number rather than a rather large negative number. So I think that's an important story for the general fund, and in my view is pretty remarkable considering where we began the year. Looking where that takes us, we began the year with $41.1 million in unreserved fund balance in the general fund. Adding that 0.6 leaves us with an ending unreserved fund balance of $41.7 million. Very, very solid financial position. That represents 33.7% of the budgeted expenditures for the year. So well above the minimum 25% target. That is the city's policy. And compared to expected results, again, just phenomenal, I think, that we ended the year as well as we did when expectations were quite dismal at the end of 2009. One last slide on the general fund financials. This is a historical perspective of where the city has ended each year with its general fund, unreserved fund balance. You can see kind of the yellow or green line. I guess it's more yellow than green. At 25%, that's the target for unreserved fund balance. At 33.7% for 2010, again, we're solidly above that minimum level. The 2011 budget contemplates utilizing a portion of the unreserved fund balance. If that in fact plays out and we use everything that was budgeted, we would still end well above that 25% target, minimum target level. That would be about 31.7% of budget. So city general fund is looking extremely well. Again, the bottom line, we had a good year for the general fund. Ended the year in a very strong financial position, and I believe we're ready to meet the challenges and the opportunities ahead of us in the coming year. Shifting now from operating budget to the capital budget, the sales tax fund is the city's primary capital fund. It supports the capital needs of the non-utility departments. This chart shows you the sources of funding and obviously very heavily weighted to that second penny sales tax that represents 94% of all the revenues going into the capital fund, as you would expect. A number of other capital grants and other capital contributions are put in there that round out the other 6% of the revenue. Total revenues in the fund were, as the chart indicates, were actually down about $4.1 million. It's a little bit misleading. The $51.3 million in total revenues in 2009 represents kind of a spike in revenues. There were some bond proceeds that went into the fund in 2009 for the quality of life and flood control bonds that were issued, and so those obviously didn't reoccur in 2010, and so the total came down. But if you remove the effect of the bond proceeds going in 2009 from that comparison, you would see that revenues, the remaining revenues, were actually up $2.4 million in our capital fund. So very, very solid growth in the core revenues for that fund as well. Again, a 10-year history on the second penny sales tax revenues, as you would expect. It looks very similar to the one I showed you on the general fund, with the exception that in 2009, of course, that's when the rate was changed from 0.92 to a full 1% rate. So with that change, there was actually positive growth in 2009 of 1.4%. And in 2010, we see 4.6% growth. That's partly because the 09 number is a little bit artificially low, because when the new rate went into effect January 1st of 09, it takes some time for that to translate into tax collections because of the time lag when the rate change took effect. So again, I think it's important to note the solid trend of growth over the past 10 years. It's just been marching along pretty effectively and growing, as you would expect, in a growing community like ours. This pie chart shows where the capital fund dollars were invested in 2010. On the left, you can see includes the debt service as a separate slice of the pie, but that's really misleading, I think. So I've added the other pie chart there to show those debt service expenditures in their functional areas, so we can see where those dollars are actually being put to use and for what function they're supporting. And I think that more accurately depicts how those dollars are being put to use. You can see that highways and streets represent 70% of the sales tax dollars that are being put to use or were put to use in 2010. So that's a significant number, obviously. Culture and Rec followed up with 17 cents on the dollar, with public safety at about 9%. That is, the red slice there is a little bit inflated beyond what you might consider normal because of the final bond payments that were made in 2010 on the law enforcement center. So next year I expect you'll see that shrink down. This next slide includes I won't go through all these, but you can see that there were 44 projects supported with sales tax dollars that were complete, or at least substantially complete, by the end of the year, to where they could be placed into service. Clearly, a lot of projects were accomplished and placed into service. Another 58 that are in one phase or another of being designed, put to bed, and constructed. Again, that list reflects only those that are supported with the second penny sales tax dollars. In terms of the final picture for the sales tax fund, you can see we started the year with $7.1 million in unreserved fund balance. Based on revenues exceeding expenditures, we added 0.8 changes in reserve, added another $500,000, so we ended the year with $8.4 million in unreserved fund balance in the capital improvement sales tax fund. Out of that $8.4 million, about $4.6 million is carried over to finish some of those projects that are in progress or were in progress as of the end of 2010. So that out of that $8.4 million, then that leaves $3.8 million as, in effect, unobligated fund balance in the capital fund. I think that might be a good point to just stop and comment briefly on the Event Center and the Event Center financing plan. I have had some opportunity to spend a little time on that to this point. That will certainly become a key focus in the weeks and the months to come in the very near future. There will be, of course, a complete financial plan for the Event Center project prepared. over the next couple of months as further information becomes available that clarifies the costs involved and some of the revenues that we might anticipate for that project. I do know that the concept or the framework of the financing plan includes a cash component of $15 million to be contributed by the city as a first, as a kind of a down payment or an equity contribution in the project, if you will. And it would be my intention to advocate that we utilize that $3.8 million in unobligated fund balance in the capital fund as our first installment toward reaching that $15 million cash component. And as we move along in further developing the financing plan for the project, as well as developing the capital improvement plan to be updated later this year, I think you'll see a lot more. I know you'll see a lot more details on that, but that would be the position I would advocate, is to utilize that $3.8 million in unobligated dollars to begin to meet that $15 cash component for that project.
Tracy, did you say 50 or 15?
15.
15.
15 in cash. I believe that was in the conceptual plan that was laid out last fall. Turning now to the enterprise funds, which are what government accountants refer to as business-type activities. They're, in government, I guess, the closest thing to a profit-oriented business, although we don't try to make a profit necessarily. The city does have 5 enterprises. They are intended to be self-supporting, so rates are intended to cover the entire cost of providing those services, and they're not intended to be dependent at all on general tax revenues for support. This chart reflects the total enterprise fund revenues of $57.7 million for those 5 enterprises. Water and water rec, as you might expect, are the 2 largest, comprise about 2/3 of the revenues of all of the enterprise funds. And that's reflective of their large customer base serving the entire community. This chart indicates that all of the 5 enterprise funds had very good years. Each of them provided a positive change to their ending net assets for the year. The cash flows, which are really very critical when we talk about enterprise funds, it's very important that the operations of each of these enterprises generates enough cash not only to pay the day-to-day operating expenses, but also to have enough cash left to reinvest in the system, improving infrastructure where it's needed and expanding where it's appropriate. Each of the 5 showed very, very good positive cash flows from their operations. So I think in that respect it was a very successful year for all 5 of the enterprise funds. You'll see that the Water Rec Fund actually had a net decrease in cash. Probably not a big surprise to you folks, given the year that was experienced last year with the sanitary sewer system. There was a significant payment that was received just last week, I believe, from FEMA that reimbursed about $1 million in expenditures for the Water Rec Fund. So that certainly went a long ways toward replenishing that negative cash flow from last year. The last significant segment of my presentation, I want to talk a little bit about debt management, and I believe the reviewing the city's debt status and debt management are really a key component for anyone to understand the city's overall financial picture. So I've got a couple slides. First pie chart represents the total outstanding debt of the city as of the end of 2010. About $277 million. That's actually down very slightly from the end of 2009. And you can see in the chart that the enterprise debt makes up the largest portion of it at 57%. One highlight, I guess, that I'll mention in terms of the debt management activity during 2010, as you folks I'm sure have heard before, were briefed on before, but the There were entertainment tax bonds that were refinanced in 2010, and I think the finance office certainly deserves some kudos for that. They took advantage of the low interest rates, which will, over the next 4 years, save the city over $872,000 in interest costs. So that was kind of the highlight for the year. The one thing you may hear about in the news from time to time from other states is kind of how local governments and state governments, for that matter, utilize debt financing. And one thing that you won't ever see for the City of Sioux Falls is to borrow money for anything other than capital projects. There are states in the country that are having to borrow money to pay their day-to-day operating expenses. Some states have issued IOUs to their employees because they didn't have the money to pay them. And that's at the opposite end of the spectrum, I guess I would say, for how the City of Sioux Falls does business. The city only borrows money on a long-term basis for capital projects, never for operating. And this chart shows you that of that $277 million in debt, just the underlying purpose for which that debt was issued, with, as you might expect, the infrastructure needs of the community being the largest share there at 79%. And I've listed a few of the major infrastructure projects for which we do have debt outstanding. It seems oftentimes that debt is treated as a dirty word in government in particular, but it's certainly a very useful tool, and it's a way for a community to grow and to provide amenities that would not otherwise be affordable. And if you can look at that on a personal perspective, how many individuals would be able to afford to buy a home without going into debt at one point or another, or buy a new car for that matter? So debt's not a dirty word if it's properly managed, which it is here. And I think that's underscored in the report that was provided when those event center refinancing bonds were issued by Moody's bond credit rating agency. And I know you've seen this information before, but I think it really bears repeating because it really tells a story. And the highlighted words there in yellow came directly out of the rating agency's report. They refer to the cities as having solid debt service coverage, well-managed city finances, and a healthy reserve level. And I think that just really underscores how highly thought of the city's financial picture is by the rating agency. It's the bond rating was AA2, which is a very good rating, and I think is a key indicator, objective indicator, of the city's financial strength. The last slide here regarding the debt management, and again, this information has been updated. You've seen something similar to this, I think, in the past, but it really underscores how responsible I think the city has been with the use of debt financing as a tool. On a per capita basis, out of the peer communities listed here, City of Sioux Falls has the lowest per capita debt outstanding of all those communities. I think that just really, again, underscores the strong financial capacity that the City of Sioux Falls has going forward, and we're in an outstanding position to deal with whatever financial challenges we might face in the future. So, in recapping, 2010 was a good year. It wasn't an outstanding year, but it turned out to be much better than anticipated at the beginning of the year. The economic recovery did begin in Sioux Falls. We saw improving employment picture. We saw negative trends flatten out, and some turn around. We saw good growth in the retail sales, and we saw a good increase in sales tax revenues as a result. The city managers in the departments and throughout the city demonstrated very effective management of their budgets, and by taking decisive action in early 2010, we're able to address the pretty significant budget concerns that were faced when 2010 began. I think the department's performed extremely well in finding efficiencies and bringing the general fund budget in at $8.9 million under budget. We're able to make significant investments in the core infrastructure of the city. Capital Sales Tax Fund put $46.3 million to work in capital investments, including 70% on the highways and street system. We ended the year in a very solid financial position. General fund, unreserved fund balance actually increased, ending the year with a $41.7 million unreserved fund balance, 33.7% of budgeted expenditures, and we also ended the year with a very manageable level of city debt. So 2010 was a good year, not great, but again, we're just positioned extremely well for the future. I do want to thank my finance office team. They've just put together an outstanding effort in assisting me in putting together this presentation and helping me tell the city's story of 2010. I also want to thank the council for their patience in waiting for this presentation. I know it's 2 or 3 weeks later than what you would normally hear this presentation. I certainly appreciate the extra time in familiarizing myself with the city finances. And I would assure you that the future financial presentations will get back on a more regular schedule. And that concludes my presentation. Certainly entertain any questions you have time for.
Questions? Councilor Aguilar.
Tracy, could you explain to me, under general fund expenditures, transit, what is transfers?
The transfers go primarily to the transit system. The transit system is accounted for as a fund in and of itself. So in order to get financial resources into that fund, money is transferred. And under state budget laws, when you move money, even if you're just moving it from one fund to another, you need the legal spending authority to do that. And so that has to be put into the budget, and then it's budgeted again in the transit fund to actually be spent.
Thank you.
I don't know if that clarifies it or not. It is transfers are confusing. But it's general fund money that's used to support the transit system.
Any other questions for Tracy? Councilor Brown.
Good presentation. Thanks, Tracy. A couple of questions. In 2010, in the capital improvement program, there were holdbacks because we didn't know where we were coming in. You mentioned 9 projects that weren't started. Is that including the holdbacks?
I believe some of those may have been on the list of holdbacks, but by and large, those projects did get done. It was a very competitive bid environment, so a number of them were able to be completed with money that was saved on other projects that were not subject to holdbacks. There was one fairly significant street project that was subject to a holdback, but actually ended up being reprogrammed into the 2011 CIP. So that project will be completed this year. There were some other dollars that make up part of that $4.6 million that's carried forward then into 2011. So one way or another, I think all those projects were either completed or still are on the agenda to be completed.
So those 9, in here it looked like there were 11 not started. They're fairly minor projects. In a general sense, can you tell us, or maybe that's not for you to comment on, but I'm just wondering what we're still leaving on the table unfinished.
And then I should clarify the number of projects in your report that are highlighted as not completed, not started, represent all capital projects. The slide in my presentation reflected just those that were supported with sales tax, second penny sales tax dollars. So there are other utility projects and those types of things that would comprise the others. I think it's fair to say that the significant projects that have been in the plan are moving forward and being executed. Public Works is executing their plan to complete the projects. I know there were some dollars that were carried over. One of the projects that was on a holdback were some of the street improvements in the uptown area. Some of those were done. Some of those remain to be done, and there were dollars carried forward to the 2011 budget that will be utilized. I believe it's 14th Street that's going to be reconstructed this year. So there really weren't any significant projects that did not get completed or reprogrammed or carried forward into the 2011 budget.
Thank you.
Councilor Intamin.
On your slide 22 that you had, Tracy, you had under the 2010 general fund expenditures also, you had personnel, and budgeted we had $82 million, and the actuals were 78.2, so there's about a 4.6% decrease. Is that as a result of staff positions not being filled, or any idea at all what that would be?
Well, I can't tell you with any specificity how much of that might have related to vacant positions. I know in any organization of any size, you'll have a certain amount of savings from vacancies that occur throughout the year. After somebody leaves, it takes a certain amount of time to fill those positions. That would certainly account for some of that. And I know that the departments, as part of their contingency plan, a number of them cut back on part-time positions as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Tracy. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you'll get back to our regular schedule of monthly updates?
We will.
Okay, very good.
Thank you for being kind.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that concludes our presentations. We do have a Public Services Committee meeting. The chair is here, Councilor Anderson. Would you like to share with the group a preview of what's to come?
Today we'll be reviewing executive orders. We also, I believe, will be getting the revised draft of the pawn shop ordinance. Our police department has been working with local pawn shop dealers to revise that ordinance. And then we're also going to go over council procedures and organization. And I believe that will be more of looking at Robert's rules and how we're using those within our committees. And
okay, very good. The clerks need a 15-minute recess in order to get set up for that next meeting. So we'll look at starting at 5:55. Is that okay? No later than 5:55, we'll re-adjourn. Without anything else, we'll adjourn this meeting.